When he was a child, Tecuani would sit on the dirty floor of his meager hut and listen to his father tell him the history of Tenochitlan, the legends of their people. He would teach young Tecuani all that he needed to know about the ways of the jungle, the ways of the warrior, and the ways of the gods. His father was an ocelot. He was a warrior. His valor, his bravery, his fighting spirit were all clear to Tecuani. He wanted so badly to be like his father, to be as strong as him, as wise as him, for his father was a man who feared nothing and knew everything. This was what it meant to be a man, to be a warrior, to be an ocelot. Though his father was a hard man and a stern one, his valor and his strength were never in doubt. Indeed, Tecuani would give anything to be like his father. To be an ocelot requires that you understand all the dangers that one would have to face. The jaguar is the undisputed apex predator of the jungle, so the ocelot must also learn to master the jungle around them. Those who train to become ocelot must spend weeks alone in the jungle, living off the land, fighting for survival, and learning to make tools and weapons from the area around them. Some trainees die in the attempt. Others go missing, only to turn up days later, half-starved or sick with jungle rot. Tecuani would not be one of these. He was prepared, or so he thought. Tecuani was 18 when he was preparing for his final test, the final trial to determine if he was prepared to be an ocelot. He was to enter the jungle, live there for 2 weeks, and return alive. However, it would not be so easy. Other trainees would be in the jungle too, and they were encouraged to steal food and supplies from each other to ensure survival. After all, the first law of the jungle is survival of the fittest. If you are not capable of fending for yourself, how can you also hope to protect your allies in war? As Tecuani's father explained it to him, protecting a country is meaningless if you cannot first protect yourself. A predator must learn self-reliance and tenacity first and foremost. So armed with nothing but his spear and a macuitl club, Tecuani had wandered deep into the jungle to begin his mission. He'd been very lucky for his first 3 days. None of the other trainees had found him, and once he'd managed to sneak into a camp of one of his rivals and procure some meat from his stock without being caught. Tecuani was feeling confident, until the storm came. A vicious, unwavering maelstrom fell upon the jungle. Trees bent and creaked in the ferocity of the gale, rain pelted down with painful sheets, and animals fled in all directions for shelter. Tecuani's own tent he'd set up was torn apart, and he lost most of his supplies. Forced to flee for his life, he ran deeper into the jungle until he found a small cavern to take refuge in. But he was to discover that he was not alone in this place. There came a low roar, and Tecuani turned to see what occupied the cave with him. A large male jaguar crouching low in a pouncing position near the back of the cave. It hissed at him furiously, and Tecuani pulled his spear. This beast was old. The gray in his fur and its sides and face told as much. But it also looked hungry and worn out. And he began to understand. This hunter had grown too old to hunt larger prey and was feeding on what it could find. But it would not take him. The predator jumped, and Tecuani howled in defiance as he dived to the side and plunged his spear into the monster's front leg. The animal screamed and rolled, but Tecuani had learned much of the ferocity and the swiftness of the jungle cat. He could not risk letting them recover. He swung around with his club and took the monster in the maw. It let out a yelp and tried to retaliate with a strike at his back. Tecuani shouted at the claw of the cat dug into its back, but he knew to roll away quickly. A jaguar always goes for the head. You can never kneel to it. Never show the beast your exposed head. He ducked as the monster leapt over him, and he finally took his spear and buried it in the cat's flank. The jaguar howled and rolled, but was unable to get up again. It thrashed and snarled furiously, only for Tecuani to bring the edge of his macuitl down on its neck. The beast stopped resisting and lay still. Tecuani took a moment to recompose himself and appreciate this victory. But he also winced as he felt the stinging pain of the claws that had dug through his back. It wasn't a deep cut, but he wouldn't be running off any time soon. Before he could begin treating that injury, he heard shuffling, movement. Taking up his spear, he wandered further into the cave, curious to the sound. Was the old beast not alone? As he peered beyond the wet mossy rocks, he saw 2 figures. Jaguar cubs, mere children. One was not moving. In fact, it was not entirely there. Its body had been bitten and gnawed by large fangs. The second cub was meowing and scratching around desperately, a bloody wound on its back. Tecuani stared at the dead cub and the injured one, and he finally understood what must have happened in this cave. Male jaguars will kill and eat cubs if desperate. This old jaguar likely ambushed a mother and killed her, then returned to her home and fed on the cubs. Either that, or he was the cub's father himself. Tecuani had interrupted it during its meal, and now, while one was dead, the other lived. This cub was helpless, likely only a few months old, if that. Tecuani knew that, given the chance, this small creature would grow into a predator itself, a rival in this battle of the fittest. He picked up his spear, preparing to slay the cub. But his spear hand stopped. The animal was defenseless. It had not learned to hunt, to stalk, or to kill. The only thing this child had seen in its life was death and betrayal. Was ending its life now really right? Was killing this creature necessary? Perhaps. It would be better than to leave it here to starve. For without a mother to feed it, without a sibling to play with it, the cub would surely die slowly and painfully. The first law of the jungle is survival of the fittest. Those who are willing to do what is necessary are the ones who will survive. That was what his father always taught him. Only the self-reliant can be trusted with the future. That was the entire purpose of this exercise. So why did he hesitate? He couldn't explain it. But he also couldn't bring himself to slay the cub. He returned to his kill and sat back against the wall to begin cutting out any meat from the beast. Best not to let it go to waste, after all. He built for himself a small fire, lit with the fat from the animal. As he cooked the meat, he turned to see the cub walking out towards him hungrily. It did not attack. It merely inspected him. "I suppose you are hungry too?" Tecuani asked. The cub did not answer. He smirked at it and tossed some of the meat to the cub. It ate gratefully. "I must be a fool," Tecuani laughed. "What do you think? Am I a fool?" The little cub ate and batted around at the dangling meat, yowling and squirming. Tecuani watched it play and found himself laughing despite himself. When it finished, the little cub toddled over to him and began batting at his toes as he wiggled them, occasionally attempting to nibble them, but only to jump back when he was kicked gently. The cub was playing, and he was playing back. "You're a little teaser yourself," Tecuani laughed. "I suppose that's what I shall call you. Ahuila. It means to tease." The little Ahuila seemed content, or as content as any jaguar cub, having survived a nightmare like it had, could be. The rest of the week passed in quiet bliss. Ahuila made a good companion. Though always hungry, she never attempted to hurt Tecuani, and he would feed her meat from the carcass of her would-be killer. When Tecuani's strength returned, he left the cave to hunt, dragging back any kills he'd made. In return for feeding her, Ahuila would play with his feet and fingers, jumping around, chasing butterflies, and generally just making a nuisance of herself. But at night, she was an excellent lookout, waking at the slightest sound and yowling when she heard something coming. Tecuani managed to find an odd ally in the cub. When his time of testing had ended, Tecuani got up and left the cave with little Ahuila right behind him. He didn't try to stop her. He knew the cub would not survive well on her own. Such a thing would be impossible for her. Instead, he had another plan. When he reached the border of Tenochitlan, he stopped and picked up the little cub and carried her with him to the city gates. The guards that saw him approached looked overjoyed and announced his return. Villagers and elders ran out to greet him, but all stopped when they saw the cub. What was he doing with that? Why had he brought it? His father was among those who ran to greet his son. "We thought you had died," he cried. "The storm had been intense, and many of the trainees returned to escape its wrath. Where were you?" Tecuani told his tale. Every bit of it. The people heard him speak of finding safety in the cave, the old jaguar that had attacked him and he'd killed, and then the cub he'd spared. "I tell you the truth, father. I know not why I could not kill this cub, but I could not raise my hand to it. Instead, I sheltered her, fed her, and played with her. She was my companion for many nights. Perhaps she was a gift of the gods." His father looked concerned by this. "Son," he said to him, "this cub will grow to be an adult, and when it does, it will become an enemy. Will you truly shelter and protect that which may turn on you?" "I know that may be the case, father," Tecuani had said, "and perhaps I am a fool for doing it, but I believe in her. I do not see any hate in Ahuila." "Just remember, an enemy will attack you, but only ones you trust will betray you. And betrayal is always worse," his father warned. "I know this, father, but I choose to have faith." And so the matter was settled. Tecuani was accepted into the ranks of the Ocelot, and Ahuila stayed with Tecuani in his home. For years, Tecuani and Ahuila were inseparable. The cub grew gradually until, 4 years after she and he had met, the jaguar was fully grown and now far larger than Tecuani had ever expected. She was a great beast, the same size as the old animal that had once attempted to kill her, and though every citizen of Tenochitlan gave her a wide berth, she never attacked or attempted to harm anyone in the city so long as Tecuani was with her. She came when Tecuani called to her, and she even assisted him in the hunt. Ahuila would flush the quarry as Tecuani made his kill. In moments of war, Tecuani would engage the enemy, while Ahuila would wait in the foliage to pounce. In time, the people of Tenochtitlan began to whisper that Tecuani was blessed by the gods, and Ahuila was their emissary, for none had seen a jaguar share such a bond with a human. Tecuani grew into a great warrior with Ahuila by his side. But not even those two were prepared for Vela in the Order of Horkos. Storms come in all forms, they say. Some are forces of nature sent by the gods. Others are forces of man. When Vela and her conquistadors of Horkos arrived in their lands, the Tenochtitlan warriors had been caught off guard. For one thing, their armor and weapons were like nothing they'd ever seen before. Many were able to withstand the arrows, blowguns, and spears. Worse yet, they came with a corrupting stone that when spread on a weapon or when ground into a fine powder could be inhaled or ingested and would cause a severe reaction not unlike a fierce disease. Tecuani had been there to see when Vela stormed the city with her warriors. He wanted to fight, to rally to Mixcoatl, their commander, and fight back. But Mixcoatl himself had forbid it. He ordered the warriors not to attack, but rather to wait. Tecuani didn't understand, and he fumed with anger as he watched Mixcoatl and mountains of gold and treasure being loaded onto ships. Every warrior itched for a chance to attack, and some couldn't help themselves as they launched surprise attacks on Vela and her forces as they left the jungle. Those that tried were either cut down or only did minor damage before being chased back into hiding. Mixcoatl kept shouting to them in their language not to interfere, but rather to wait and to follow. Follow. The answer was dawning on the Ocelot. Mixcoatl had cleverly let himself be captured to spare Tenochtitlan, but the battle would instead be taken to the land of the invaders. The Ocelot rallied, taking up weapons, provisions, and arms, and then seizing old boats, they traveled after the invading Horkos warriors. Tecuani, his father, and of course Ahuila, were among those to give chase into the strange land beyond the sea. The Ocelot took the Horkos warriors by surprise and overwhelmed the drunk patrons. Mixcoatl, freed, engaged in battle with Vela himself. Tecuani and Ahuila were in the thick of the fighting. None of the Horkos warriors were prepared to stand against the predators of the jungle, for they'd never faced the like. But for each one that turned and fled from Ahuila, Tecuani was there to strike them down. The battle went on long into the morning, and by the time the sun was high in the sky, the victory was theirs. But only partly. Vela had escaped with some of her retinue, and Astria, the true leader of Horkos, was still alive somewhere. Some of the Ocelot requested they return home now. They had saved their leader, and though much of their gold and treasures were gone, they still had some of their treasures back, as well as plenty more back home. But Mixcoatl refused. Vela and Horkos must be punished for what they have done to us, and we must ensure they never come to our shores again. Before we return home, we will strike down this beast we're here in Heathmore. And so the hunt began. The Ocelot scattered into the jungles, fields, and mountains, searching for Horkos and Vela. Tecuani and Ahuila made their way to the mire in a province called Jukai. It was more favorable to Ahuila, who preferred the tropical marshlands of the mire, and there they could more easily perform their ambush tactics. The people of the mire, known as the samurai, were a strange type. Their language was bizarre, their armor incredible, and their weapons elegant but lethal. Any that attacked him were difficult to overcome, and even with Ahuila at his side, there were times he was forced to flee and fight another day. Days turned to weeks, and weeks into months. Every Horkos outpost taken or looted did not hide Vela, and the Ocelots were becoming frustrated, angry, and resentful. Mixcoatl told them all that they would be fine, that they needed to continue their hunt, to fight on till the last. Tecuani was tired too, but on he searched, until at last he discovered a lead. The last known hiding place of Vela, in a fortress just south of Jukai. He slipped quietly into the fortress with Ahuila, and together they searched for any sign of Vela. After an hour of quietly killing and eliminating any roaming patrols of samurai or Horkos guards, They finally discovered her, speaking with someone that made Tecuani's blood run cold. "Father?" he cried, running from his hiding spot in disbelief. There he stood, Tecuani's father, standing with Vela in casual conversation. He turned to his son and nodded his head. "Excellently done. I didn't even hear you coming. You're a true ocelot now, for certain. What is this? Why are you with Vela?" Tecuani's father looked to Vela a moment before motioning for her to leave. He then returned to the confused Tecuani. "What is the first law of the jungle?" he asked. Tecuani stared at his father a moment without answering. "It is survival of the fittest. Only the strong will survive." He then walked to the table beside him at the tent and held up a sword. It was a knight's sword. "And the people of this land are so very strong." "Father, what are you talking about?" "When Horkos attacked Tenochitlan, I was horrified by the power they could command. Armor that shook off our finest weapons. Blades as long as a man that could cleave us in two. Stones that spread plague. Ships so large they could carry whole armies across the great ocean. We are ambush predators because that is how we have always been, but the people of this land do not need to ambush their prey. They have the weapons and armor to fight their prey boldly and in the open. I saw it in Tenochtitlan, and I've seen it ever since we arrived in this land. They are the strong in this jungle, and Horkos, above them all, understands what it means to stand tall amongst them. They are the strong, and all else will fall by the wayside." "You're speaking nonsense," Tecuani shouted. "We defeated Vela and her Horkos followers when we attacked their fortress, because we had the advantage of surprise. But now all of Heathmore knows we're here. They know we stalk the swamps and tundras. They are aware of our presence. These are not the jungles of our homeland. This is their jungle," he answered. "Son, you saw it yourself these past weeks. The way these warriors fight, the way they endure. Despite your finest efforts and all your years of training, you can't deny that they are leagues above us in technology, ferocity, and strength of arms. We warred back home to make peace. They war because they are born to it. If we are to survive in this land, we must become strong. And we must stand with Horkos if we are to endure." "Father, don't do this," Tecuani argued. "We do not need to stand with Horkos. We will defeat Vela and then return home to Tenochtitlan. We are going back home to our nation. This isn't our war." "Do you truly believe that?" his father responded. "Do you know why Mixcoatl does not lead us home now? Why he ignores the pleas of his own soldiers? Because he does not know the way home. Son, we did not come to Heathmore by ourselves. We tailed Horkos' ships. Without their guide, we could never return to our homeland. Mixcoatl is too proud to pay the pirates to take us home, and too foolish to seek aid from the knights or Vikings. He has brought us here to fight and die in a war we were never meant to be a part of. If this is to be our new home, then I will not be a weakling in this land." "Father, even if what you say is true," Tecuani growled through shaking hands, "why not speak to me about it? To any of us? How could you so easily and so simply turn your back on us? On me?" His father looked at his son with something close to remorse, but then it snuffed away, leaving nothing but the cold eyes of a predator. "It's as I told you, son. Self-reliance is paramount. The trials of the Ocelot teach us to fend for ourselves first and foremost. If you cannot stand on your own, then how can you stand by your comrades? Just because my people are willing to die in the muck of this land does not mean I am content to. If you wish to stand with me, son, then do so. Come, fight alongside me, and we shall both endure in this land." Tecuani growled furiously and grit his teeth as he stared at his father. He was reminded of another old predator that he confronted. An old, desperate predator that had tried to fight him in the darkness of a cave. "You were right about one thing, Father. An enemy attacks you, but only someone you trust can betray you. And that betrayal is far worse than any attack. I'd have rather Vela run me through than discover you were just her puppet. Tecuani lunged at his father, and both started their vicious duel. Tecuani had always admired his father's skill with club and spear and shield. He was a man who fought with the will to live and to dominate, and now was no different. He held nothing back, fully intent to kill to survive. A lesson he'd always taught Tecuani, to do what is necessary to live. And now he was demonstrating that cold truth upon his own son. He'd kill Tecuani to live, and that meant Tecuani must do nothing less than the same. With furious roars of anger, Tecuani struck and weaved out of the way of his father, but it was no use. As he thought he'd caught his father, he felt the pain of a Ocelotl slash across his leg. He screamed and fell, clutching the deep gash in his thigh. Tecuani's father jumped on top of him and raised his spear. "You were a fool," his father spat. "Always so soft. You survived your trial through the help of your pet, and now you are not smart enough or strong enough to fight on your own and stand on your own." Suddenly, a realization dawned on Tecuani's father as his eyes widened. "You're more the fool, father. Because you knew, and yet forgot. I don't fight alone." The roar of Hahuila was loud enough to wake the gods. The great cat leapt from her hiding place and pounced on Tecuani's father, who was forced to roll to evade her, but the jaguar had buried her claws into his hide and was biting at his neck. Tecuani struggled to his feet and grabbed his father's dropped spear. "Ugh! Help me!" his father shouted. "Get her off!" Tecuani watched as Hahuila held down his father, biting and ripping into his flesh. He only lived now because he was holding her back with the weight of his club. He could stab Hahuila with the spear and save his father, or he could run his father through. The man who inspired him to be a warrior. The choice was obvious. The last thing his father saw was his own spear sliding through his chest as Tecuani gutted his father with a howl of rage. "Son!" He coughed as blood sprayed from his wound. Aquila then sank her teeth into her father's head, killing him in the way jaguars always kill. "Goodbye, father, and take heart, for I have become strong." Mixcoatl was devastated by the news that Tecuani brought him. He sat on a stump of a chair and shook his head. Though Tecuani and Hahuila had been victorious, it was sad to hear the fate of such a fine warrior. He lost heart, and forgot that though we adhere to the law of the jungle, we live among our brothers and sisters. Our duty is to them first, not ourselves, Mixcoatl lamented. "Mixcoatl," he said, "that you do not know the way home. We are stranded here," Tecuani muttered. "He wasn't telling the truth, was he?" Mixcoatl sighed and looked at Tecuani sadly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm afraid he is not wrong about that, my boy," he answered. "No. I do not know how to return to our land. The choice I made when I was captured was to save Tenochitlan. I knew that if the Horkos warriors took our treasure and myself, then they would leave with their spoils. And then my gallant ocelots would pursue and butcher them in the safety of their homes, thus sending our message to Horkos and to their homeland that Tenochitlan will be avenged. So we only came here to die?" Tecuani answered. "No. We came here to protect our homeland. I would like to go home, Tecuani. I miss the jungles of our lands. I miss them greatly. But if we leave, what is to stop Horkos from coming back? What will prevent them from trying again? Even were I to use what treasure we have regained to pay a pirate ship to take us home, when Horkos returns, what then? No, before we go home, we must break the back of Horkos and those who would threaten Tenochitlan. Even should we fall here in this foreign land, we shall do such damage to them that they will never threaten our homeland again for fear of experiencing the same pain." "And what of Tenochitlan in our absence?" Tecuani asked. "She will survive," Mixcoatl answered. "More ocelots will be chosen. New protectors, new buildings on top of old, and like a tree that falls in the jungle, new life will grow from it. I have faith in the strength of our people, more so than I do in myself alone. That is why I knew you would all come to save me when I was captured. Because your father was wrong, Tecuani. Strength is not in merely being the fittest or the most powerful, but in the one who has allies at his back and with faithful companions at his side. Your father forgot this in the face of fear. But you and Ahuila embody this truth every day. Will you still fight for me, bold predator? Legends abound in the mire that in Jukai there is a great beast that stalks the jungles. A growl like a great animal can be heard moments before the beast strikes. Beside that beast is a man who fights with no less ferocity. He cannot be seen before he attacks. He cannot be heard. All that is heard is the scream of the dying, even when no bodies are yet noticed. He is a predator from a foreign land along with his comrade, a beast of equal lethality. The samurai know him as a predator, and Horkos know him as a menace. But Tecuani and Ahuila are predators without equal.